Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of the series within the digital adoption show that we call DAP Upskill, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries of digital transformation across various departments within any organization. I'm your host, Arya, and in today's episode, we're diving deep into the strategies that sales engineers employ to customize DAP for the unique needs of the customers coming from different industries and how this leads to maximizing client ROI. We have a special guest with us today, Raj Nair, a seasoned sales engineer at Whatfix. With his wealth of experience and insights, Raj is here to shed light on the fascinating world of digital adoption platforms. But before we get into the nitty gritty of DAP customization, we want to understand the driving forces behind the individuals who make it all possible, the sales engineers themselves. We'll explore what it takes to thrive in this field, the love that fuels their passion, and the challenges that they face. And of course, we won't stop there. We'll delve into the perceptions of DAP across various industries, the diverse requirements that clients bring to the table, and the crucial aspect of userization. How do these professionals ensure that DAP is user friendly for all types of customers? We'll discuss that. What sage advice does Raj have for those considering taking a leap into the world of digital adoption? Is also something we will get into. Join us as we uncover the secrets to successful DAP customization with Raj Nair, right here on the Digital Adoption Show. Welcome, Raj. Welcome to the Digital Adoption Show. We are so excited to have you, and I'm sure it's going to be an episode full of learning, full of insights for our listeners. How are you feeling? How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a bright and cold morning, but it's good. Excited for this. I think we've been talking about this for a while, and there's some really interesting topics to talk about. So yeah, thanks for having me.
It's amazing, amazing. So let's just start by, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this field, what do you love about your job, what are some challenges that you face as a sales engineer?
Yeah, DAP was relatively new to me as well when I joined. I think a lot of folks who end up working in DAP kind of share that experience. So I'm a mechanical engineer by education, and I come from very core technical background that way. But I've always worked in software and done sales as part of that, pre-sales as well. So yeah, that's where I come from. Whatfix, kind of fell into my lap in terms of I wasn't really looking out for DAP per se. And as I said, I had no idea about DAP for this. But once you find it, I think it kind of flips a switch in your brain. The most beautiful thing about this technology is it's such an obvious thing. It's right there in front of you, but you've never really thought about it until until you see it.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of us, when we are new to it, I'm sure all of us felt that way.
I came from the same place that you are coming from. I'm an engineer myself. Even coming from a technical background, I did not know about this. But then now that I got to know it's right there. Like we come across it every single day, but we just never think of it as, a different thing. It's a part of the process. And it's a nice thing that it's getting the recognition that it should, because it's important. It's an integral part of every software, every application that we use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into this, and because of that, it's easy to also explain it to people, not just for customers, but even in layman terms, just to tell someone what the technology does.
Yeah.
Everyone who's used a banking application and trying to log into their banking portal probably relates to this, and the ability to use software, and it goes so broad. So in that sense, I think it was an easy transition for me. So in terms of what I do here, I think everyone plays different roles in respect to who we are talking to. So let's say in terms of my customers, my role is to help them make an educated decision about why this technology makes sense to them, what kind of problems it solves for them. Sometimes they might not know that a problem exists. Yeah. And in that sense, kind of hand-holding them towards the recognition of that problem. I like to think of it as like if you ever been a coach or a teacher for someone who's new. So let's say I know a friend who teaches yoga for like 7-8 years now. Mm-hmm. And all she does is she teaches just beginners. She doesn't teach anyone who's intermediate or advanced. She only teaches beginners, and she's been doing that for 8 years. So I asked her, how do you motivate yourself?
Yeah.
And what she told me was, when you continue to teach beginners, you see that, recognition that they get at the beginning of, oh, this is so much fun, or this is so valuable. And that's what I see in my customers. A lot of my customers who come to this are very new, and they just have no clue about what DAP can do to them. And once you start telling them about it, and once it starts clicking, that experience of them going through the recognition of what the technology does for them is very similar. So that's what makes me motivated to do it. It's like I can keep doing this continuously for new and new people, and it won't stop being fun, because you just see that light bulb moment for them, and that's just very rewarding.
That actually is very rewarding. We're talking along the lines of what I was going to ask you next, which is you deal with people on a day-to-day basis, right? And so how do they perceive DAP? Like, I'm sure you have some instances or some fun interpretations that maybe people have made of DAP when you've tried to explain them what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you talk to. So that we work with a wide range of customers. I mean, personally, I focus a lot on HR domain and HR related customers. But I'll give you a few examples. Recently, I was working with a company that makes software for behavioral interventionists. What that means is someone who goes to houses and meets autistic kids. So for them, you might not think like, where does DAP come into picture? But what they do on a day-to-day basis is use technology in front of someone who needs help, and they really need to make sure that the technology is helping them do their job.
Yeah.
Right. So in that situation, making sure that it's personalized, making sure that it's not tech heavy, and that they get that help when they need it, is super important. And that gives, and those kinds of examples. So I've seen similar things with doctors in, optician clinics. I've seen it with auto part manufacturers. If you go for a car servicing, people there use technology. So what I've learned over time in this is, there's different domains where people need to use technology in different ways, and DAP can touch each of their lives. Obviously, we can go through examples like finance and HR, where it's a much more corporate use case. But what I've found more interesting are the more day-to-day use cases, where we usually don't think that this can really be impactful.
Yeah, I had no idea that the user case could be such a broad thing that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay, that's actually very interesting. That's new information for me also. So, coming back to DAP, recently, heard about this word called data-driven DAP. Can you tell us a little bit about what is data-driven DAP, or like the importance of data while implementing DAP?
Yeah, so let's look at that example that I just took, which is, we're trying to help someone who's doing an assessment for autistic kids, and they want to use the technology. Our goal with DAP is to make their life easy, and nudge them at the right points, make sure that they enter the right things when they need to, and be able to use that software really well. How do we know where they need help? Like, how do we know how they're using that software, and how do we know where they're making mistakes?
Yeah.
So the crux of data-driven DAP is about knowing your user before you change their behavior, or before you give them the support that they need. Because usually in traditional approaches of DAP, and this is part of the evolution of the industry as well, traditionally we would usually, when a customer, an L&D team comes to us and says, hey, we need to implement DAP, assuming they know about it, their first thought is, let's just take the traditional things that we already have, like a PDF which tells them how to use that software or how to do this process, and let's convert that into a digital interactive walkthrough for the end user, which works pretty well in a lot of instances. But what it doesn't do is, or what it involves, is an assumption that we know what the user is already struggling with, and we are just trying to solve for that problem. So with data-driven DAP, what you're doing is you're starting from a point of saying that I want to know what the user is actually doing. So let me understand the user's behavior on that software. So it could be any of those softwares we talked about. How are they exactly going through each of these processes in the software itself? without having any help in the first place. Where are they dropping off? Where are they struggling? Why are they struggling? And who is struggling? Right. So once you know all of these things, once you have a much better understanding of who your user is, you now have a way more data backed decision to make that, okay, I know that this user is struggling on this feature at this time, and they belong to this region, or they have this role. Based on all of that, you can be very tailored and very targeted. So in that example that I took, not every interventionist needs to see a pop-up when they enter like the details of their patient. It might be just one or two. So giving it to the right people at the right time can make a lot of difference, because otherwise it can become annoying as well. If you see something that you don't need to see, it completely defeats the purpose. So that's the crux of data-driven DAP. It's to understand your user and then serve them based on that.
I mean, it is a solution at the end of the day, right? You need to find out who your target is, what is his problem, what kind of solution can be built for this specific persona, and then work around that. So, okay, this is basically we're getting into the direction of userization only. We've discussed userization earlier on this podcast. So let's just touch upon that again. How important do you think as a sales engineer that userization is, and how is it helping your customers? Why do you think it has to be customized for every user case?
Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, when you're trying to help someone, you want to make sure that you know what help they need. Otherwise, you're just assuming that this is the help they need and you give it to them. It might not actually end up being helpful.
It's not helpful.
So you got to know what the user really needs and this is, I mean, in general, when you're trying to help someone. So with userization, it goes hand in hand with data-driven DAP. Userization, in a sense, is about personalizing the experience to every user so that we are talking to them, directly to that person, not to them as a nebulous, but as an individual who needs a certain kind of help. And the only way you can do that is by first tracking, understanding what their behavior is, where they're struggling, and go on and create something, take an action on that. I think a good way of explaining it is through examples. So one good example that I had the opportunity to work with was, obviously we can't get into specifics details, but there's this cybersecurity platform that the customer was using, and they wanted to understand how can they help their marketing team see what the user is doing and adequately show them the right, maybe upselling or cross-selling messages. So this can be very useful. I'm sure every company, every organization is trying to look at the usage of their products and be able to tell when there's an opportunity to upsell or cross-sell and so on. In that instance, what you can do is you can figure out exactly which features your end user or your customer ended up using, exactly which features they showed interest in, but they didn't actually end up using. So there's different nuances of the behaviors you could look at. And based on that, you can, show a targeted message. Think of it like when you log into your banking portal, and sometimes you get these messages for, oh, would you like to sign up for this credit card? That is userization talking to you, right? That is basically looking at what you did, looking at your overall behavior in the software, maybe clicking on, you might have maybe looked at some other offers in that space. And so based on that, they're able to not just understand what you might need, but also take an action on it. So this is where Whatfix or DAP goes one step further than just analyzing what the user is doing. But okay, based on that knowledge, can I talk to them? Can I give them the next recommendation? Another good example, before I pause, is in HR, people analytics is a very common thing these days. A common example of people analytics, very relevant one, is how companies decide, do we want to go hybrid versus do we want to go remote or in office? Some companies, what they've done is they've tried to understand what the employees prefer in terms of their behavior. So you can understand their calendar management and try to see if they have to put a lot of focus hours when they're in the office versus when they're not. And you can look at feedback from them, implicit or explicit feedback. And all of this can be used to then send them a message, talk to them and say, hey, we see that you have too many focus hours. Is it something that you would like to talk to? From an HR's point of view, the HR can communicate with the employees directly, but not just because they have a policy, but because you know that this employee is struggling because of their workload management. So once again, the way userization works in that instance is you are specifically looking at certain people based on their needs and then addressing that need.
Okay. All right. That was amazing. My next question was going to be around this only, as to, how do you ensure that DAP is user friendly for everyone who's using it? But like you said, it's all data driven. Like you do an analysis before building the product for each and every one. But you answered my question right there only. The next thing I wanted to know from you is, now that we've discussed userization, data driven building of DAP, what are some things that Whatfix is coming up with? What are some DAP innovations going on in Whatfix, or what are the newer things that you are doing after looking at everything that people usually do struggle with?
Yeah. So one of the things is, as we talked about, being able to communicate even when they're not in a certain application. So oftentimes DAP, when folks think of it, they think of it in the context of, oh, when someone is using an application, I want to be able to help them, which obviously is the core of the technology. But what if they're not using an application? What if, let's say, we have new hires who come into the organization, and the IT team usually sends them a laptop. And when we open it up, we have this huge list of Excel sheet items that we have to go through and complete. And we're often lost. We are like trying to talk to our managers and trying to figure out who to talk to. What if you can communicate to them right on their laptop? Think of it like how your phone has Siri that you can talk to and say, hey, I don't know where this is. Can you help me? Or ask any questions. What if you can do that on your laptop? So where I'm getting to is that there's been a recent push towards what we call Whatfix Hub, which is being able to communicate at a system level rather than at an application level. So when, in that example, the HR example, let's say you want to do IT orientation. When I open my laptop for the first time as a new hire, I can be invited into that system and be said, hey, welcome to Whatfix. Here's a few things we would like to take you through. And these are the things that we would want you to do to set up your system and set up your logins and whatnot. Instead of an Excel sheet, you're basically being guided as if someone's standing next to you, like the HR is standing next to you and just taking you through that. It's a very, once again, all of this is data driven. So it's very personalized, very tailored. So the experience of being, going through a journey of anything, it could be being a new hire onboarding, it could be doing an assessment, an autism assessment, it could be at a retail shop for a tire manufacturer, whatever it might be, whatever experience you're having through the software, you can do all of that at a system level so that you feel that someone's standing next to you and guiding you through.
Actually very helpful, especially for people who are new joinees. Like, everyone is clueless on the first day. Like they really don't know who to go to, what to do. It's just the HR that they're sitting with, or maybe like someone who's their onboarding manager or something like that. But if you can save all those resources and just have something like this on your laptop itself who's guiding you, it's like a good first day experience. And that's when you're inviting someone into your company and asking them to work for you, you need to give them that comfort starting from the first day itself.
Exactly. And I love the word that you use, like making them comfortable in that system. And you can use that for that paradigm for a few other roles in that same thing. So let's say you're trying to make the employee comfortable. What if the manager is new? Like he or she is a new manager and they have no idea how to help them file an expense report or how to order them a laptop, like their employees a laptop or something like that. Being able to, once again, communicate to them or let them know those things on this at a system level. So usually what would happen if I wanted to order a laptop for one of my employees, I'd have to go to the HR system, log into that, find my way through all of that. Hopefully there's DAP on that system, so I would be able to find it. But it basically means I need to be on some software to do that. What if I don't have to do that? What if I can just be on my laptop and just ask my Siri or, an equivalent of that and say, hey, I need to order a laptop for my employee. These are the details. Can you help me with that? And What if Whatfix can basically take that information, go to that relevant application where that process is, and do it for you without you having to even be in that application?
It's like having a personal assistant on your laptop.
Pretty much. So like even on our phone, like think of how we use our phones every day. We have a notification hub, we go through it and we see, okay, this is what I need to do today. Maybe I don't need to, I'll just swipe it off. Maybe this is something I need to do, so let me click on it, do that. Same thing. Imagine if it was on your laptop. When you log into every day for your work, you open your laptop, you see that, okay, these are the notifications I have for this. Maybe something is in Workday, something is in my sales system, something is in my marketing system, and I can decide if I need to go to that or not. If I do, I can then go into that application and then continue the DAP experience there. But so that's the thing, it doesn't have to be application dependent, if that makes sense.
Amazing. This could be revolutionary. I feel like this is something so new. This is the first time I'm hearing of someone trying to do this with people, and especially with new employees. I feel like this is such a great thing. It resolves so many issues that you're facing mentally, emotionally, all of it. Like if there's someone to help you, it helps in all ways possible. I really feel so.
I bet I feel like we've hit a nerve somewhere there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last technical question that I have for you is that with different types of clients that you deal with, right? Like you just said, maybe the retail system, maybe the manufacturing sector, maybe the health sector. What are the different kinds of requirements that those clients come up with? Is that like different requirements according to the set of industry that they represent, or is it something a little more general than that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So it depends on, there's two parts to that question. One is the kind of industry you're dealing with and the kind of people in that industry you're dealing with. So let's take those two one by one. So in terms of the industry, yeah, absolutely. The way each industry works can define the way they look at DAP. So one example is, as I mentioned, retail banking. Retail banking or finance in general, as you can imagine, they're very, very, privacy first approach. Like they want to make sure everything that they do has the user's privacy at its forefront. So when we go in and pitch an idea for a DAP solution, first thing they think about is, okay, what's being read, what is being passed on to Whatfix, and how are they storing it, and all of that. So that can again, that doesn't mean that they're not open to the idea, but it's something that they come with as a initial layer of scrutiny. Another one, and this is something that I previously did, as I mentioned, I was a mechanical engineer. So I used to work in we call it simulation. So think of something like when you design a car, you have to simulate airflow around it. So I used to work in that industry, which was very software heavy, very technical. In those industries, the user experience of those softwares are pretty bad, but that's not the priority. For them, the priority is to make sure that the design of that car goes through and you're able to get the right design correctly. And a lot of those people who use it are such subject matter experts in that, like they are so software minded, they don't even realize that the UX isn't that great. So in that, you have to educate them. They don't even see that there is a UX problem until someone new comes into that role and they're like, okay, I have no clue how to use the software. So that industry, there's no data issue. They're not saying, oh, we need to go through InfoSec. They're saying that we don't even know if there is a problem here. Similar, so depending on the industry, they'll have certain traditional ways of doing it. So some of them are so traditional, it's a very hard sell to even make them realize that it could be a very beneficial for them to have a digital transformation. That's for the industry. In terms of people, now let's say someone comes to us. I think the mechatronics, the manufacturer example that I mentioned, the person who came to us was a product person, not an L&D person.
Okay.
So in that case, what their thought process with something like this is not necessarily to train someone or give them support, but understanding, can I know my product better? Can I know my product usage better? So depending on the person who you're talking to, their need would be different. So for a product person, it's the ability to change things on their product using product knowledge and somewhat DAP as well. So that's where the analytics part of Whatfix comes into play. A lot of product managers like to use Whatfix to just understand how someone is using their product and where they can improve their product per se, not to necessarily nudge the user, but to actually change the product.
Yeah.
Whereas if I talk to an L&D person, they don't have that much control on the product. They can't change the product. So they're thinking about changing the user. So for them, DAP is to have that control that they otherwise wouldn't have from a product standpoint, and use that to nudge the user, give them what they need, and have some control that way. Whereas if you talk to a business person who's either not in the training program or the L&D program, neither are they in a product role, but they're making higher level decisions. For them, they would love to understand the metrics from a much overarching point of view. So when you talk to them about having a process walkthrough and things like that, that's great. But what's my KPI that I'm getting to? Like, how many rounds of training that I can avoid? How many rounds of product releases can I avoid? Essentially, they overarch the other two personas, but they're looking at a much higher level. So it depends on who you talk to, and you have to adapt to that.
Okay. All right. So I just have one last question to you. You know everything in and out about DAP, the type of customers who we cater to, the type of solutions that you build for them. So what is one piece of advice that you would have for anyone who's making this leap into their business with DAP?
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to knowing your user. I think anyone who is thinking about how can I change my user's experience or improve their experience, and DAP is a means to that. And so some people might know it, some people might not know it, and then that's our job to educate them about it. But even if you are thinking about improving your user's experience and DAP might be a means to it, I recommend folks to think about knowing what that user experience is, because knowledge of that can guide you to make the right decisions. It could be to improve your product. It could be to nudge the user, which is what a lot of the traditional DAP solutions are. But either of that depends on what your user experience is right now. So being able to know that user experience is probably the first thing you should do. A lot of people do, and a lot of the folks do actually try that with explicit feedback. So you do see with most products, you'd have surveys going out that you would have to fill out that give you some end user feedback, but it's very anecdotal. So having real-time feedback of your users' experience on your product, or it could be internal product, external product, doesn't matter. I'd say start with that, and it will lead you to DAP eventually.
Amazing. So I don't have any more questions for you. That is the end of this episode. I genuinely learned a lot. You told me so many things that I did not know. So I can only imagine how much of it other people know from people who are not from this space. But it's all very, very interesting and exciting. And I hope the next laptop I get, I need a laptop. Siri on that laptop for sure. I need my first day when I'm overriding with confidence. I want that to be my first day.
Yeah, first of all, I appreciated this conversation as well. As I said, I completely resonate on that thought, which is I feel like that coach that sees a new beginner every time, and every beginner is different. They bring in a different need, they bring in a different context, they have a different background, and it's about making them mold into what they need to get to, and you are just part of that process. So it's, as you said, like there's so many different use cases, so many different avenues this can touch, and that's what makes it really interesting
Rewarding
and fun.
at the end of the day. Your job is fun, it's rewarding, and you're bringing change. You're really bringing change into how people work and making their lives easier. Kudos to that.
It's a good point to end on. Yeah, that's really well put. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope we get to host you again sometime.
Hey, anytime. I'm sure I would love to hear more about your onboarding experience. Seems like I've pretty much hit a nerve there somewhere. So I feel like there's a lot more to talk about that. But no, happy to come back anytime.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye, Raj.
Thank you all for listening. Stay tuned as we bring you fresh perspectives every week on the Digital Adoption Show. We are thrilled to announce that our podcast is now live on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and much more. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes filled with insightful conversations. We greatly appreciate your support and encourage you to leave a comment, review, or a rating to help us continue delivering valuable content. If you have any questions on the topic, feel free to ask in the comment section below.